o'clock. Doesn't state, all members are, well, the members that are here, if you'll have your seats. I'm going to go to the IT person, so Connie can take the role. Who do we have on WebEx?
We have Jordan Mahallahan, Matt Sterling, and Michelle Segan.
That is all? 3 people. Okay, good. As members walk in. First thing up, folks, will be bill introductions. Bill introductions from committee. Seeing no bill introductions by committee, are there bill introductions by the audience? Again, seeing no bill introductions by the audience, I will close bill introductions.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I just wanted to get something corrected. There was a committee bill requested earlier by yourself, 21 RS 0465, and that was the incorrect RS. The correct one for the draft is RS 0215.
Okay, which bill was that?
That was the massage therapist bill.
Okay, all right. That's not a problem. We've got it corrected now in our minutes.
Thank you.
Committee, I'm going to take up House Bill 2058. As to House Bill 2058, does anyone want the reviser to go over that? Seeing none, then as to House Bill 2058, what is the pleasure of the committee? Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to pass out favorably House Bill 2058.
Thank you. I have a motion to pass out. Do I have a second? Representative Hauser. Discussion. The chair has an amendment. Jeannie, would you pass the amendment out? While we're passing out the amendment, Matt, would you explain the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I will pull it up in just a moment.
Folks, when you look at the amendment, if you don't have your bifocals on, put them on.
So this amendment would take the contents of House Bill 2089 and insert them into House Bill 2058. And that was the one, 2089 was the one dealing with the issuance of an alternative license by the Attorney General during a declared state of disaster emergency. So you can see the additional change that 2089 made in the in KSA 75-7 CO3, adding this additional language about when there's a state of disaster emergency, the issuance of those authorization documents to licensees, and then the additional change to 75-7 CO5, which provides that if a state of disaster emergency had been proclaimed, the Attorney General determined that it was impractical for licensees to obtain a physical card from the Department of Revenue, the Attorney General would be required to issue an authorization document in pursuant to that change in 75-7 CO3.
Thank you. What this does, this amendment, it consolidates 2089, which is the emergency management part of for disaster, declared disaster. It just puts them both in. They're both AG bills, and these trying to save time. I'm consolidating both those bills into one bill. They're harmonious. They work together. Is there a discussion on the amendment? Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the state of emergency, how does this affect the law we have on the books that is allows concealed carry if you're over 21 in the state of Kansas?
If you recall from the hearing that we had on both these bills, it allows the AG to issue letters for the renewals and, in this case, applications for new licenses, because of the Driver's License Bureau normally makes those cards up, but during an emergency, the AG would have the authority to issue it by letter. And that's what he's been doing during this present emergency on renewals, but he felt he didn't have the authority to issue a new license. But it's only during the time of declared emergency or disaster.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there is no second? I thought Hauser seconded it. Then I have Tory, Representative Arnberger. I have a motion to amend, a second, further discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The bill has been amended. Back on the bill, Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment, if staff would like to pass it out.
Jeannie, would you please? And thank you for bringing your own copies.
Yes, sir.
Would you like to explain your amendment once it's been?
Yes, I can. If you'd like the reviser to explain it, Matt, this is the modification language for House Bill 2089.
Matt, did you hear that?
Yes, Mr.
Matt?
Chairman, give me one moment and I'll pull that one up.
Okay, and could you also turn your volume up?
Oh. I will
Much
try
better.
to speak more clearly.
Much better.
Okay.
So I can explain what this amendment is doing. So this amendment, and then the reviser can fill in any holes, Mr. Chair, if that's permissible.
Go ahead.
Okay. So basically what this is doing, it's striking the state of disaster emergency portion of this and making it to where instead it's saying impractical. And the reason why is because there might come a time where the Department of Revenue might not be able to fulfill its functions, and we might not be under an active state of emergency. And so I think that this would be a good opportunity for the Attorney General to be able to still facilitate concealed carry licenses if for some reason the Department of Revenue goes down for a longer than a 30-day period. I did run this language by the Attorney General's office. They do support it, and I'll stand for any questions upon a second.
Thank you. Is there a second to the amendment? Representative Penn has seconded. Matt, are you on now?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
I see you have the amendment on the screen.
Yes.
Thank you. Could you explain it, please?
Yes. So as Representative Carpenter stated, this would make additional changes to that the committee just amended in from House Bill 2089. It would remove that specific requirement that it be pursuant to a state of disaster emergency, and it would be based upon an impracticality that the Attorney General determined that it was impractical for at least 30 days for the Department of Revenue to issue the physical cards. And then if that were the case, to then be required to issue those authorization documents to each licensee.
Thank you. Questions of the reviser? Further discussion on the amendment? Yes. Sorry. Representative Heiber?
Question for the proponent. I guess I'm trying to imagine what sort of circumstances we'd be facing where there's no declared disaster emergency, but it was impractical for the Department of Revenue to issue cards. Do you have any scenarios that you have in mind?
I think that, thank you for the question, Chair. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. In my personal opinion, you know, we did this last year have a situation where a state of disaster was declared and the Department of Revenue could not fulfill the main processing as they could still do some of it because some of their offices were still open. It was trickling in, but they weren't able to fulfill as many people. So it was impractical in their functioning of how they were able to renew those licenses for people. And so let's say that it's not a state of disaster emergency that we're going through, but instead, let's say that the Kansas Department of Revenue decides that they want to implement a new software. And the software takes down their system and just completely obliterates it now that they're having trouble issuing licenses to people. That's when this would come into play if they are struggling to fulfill their end of it, to fulfill their role, and then the Attorney General would be able to step in and say, okay, they're having some issues over there, and this just, I think, gives more leeway to the Attorney General, and instead of may, which is what the original language was, it is a shall now as well.
So I have a question of the carrier of the amendment.
Yes, sir.
You have run this, you've indicated you've run this by the Attorney General's office,
Yes, sir.
and he is in favor of this.
His staff said yes, that they are in favor.
Thank you very much. Representative Reese?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let's say that the Attorney General gives dispensation to the Department of Revenue because of some situations just like you described. I get pulled over and I have a gun with me and I say, well, I gave my name to somebody that I'm in the bank to be issued a permit to carry. Is that situation actually, what are the checks and balances on this? How do we check to see if this individual is actually in queue to be issued a permit?
I guess I'm not understanding your question. Can you re-ask it?
I think I appreciate, and presently, if they don't have a card, the AG is issued a letter during this emergency. Would that be correct?
So, well, right now, in the state of Kansas, we have constitutional carry, so you don't actually have to have a card. So that is one upside to some of our laws currently. As far as this situation that we're currently running into, I believe that the Attorney General is issuing something, but I don't know specifically what they've been issuing during this whole pandemic and everything else, while the Department of Revenue hasn't been able to keep up.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may.
So why is this necessary?
Then the question is, why is all of House Bill 2089 necessary?
It's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the Carpenter Amendment? Seeing none, oh, yes.
I just want to make final comments. So 2089 is necessary, and the reason why is because this last year we got into a situation where people were no longer able to go into the Department of Revenue, take their photograph, get their concealed carry licenses, and ultimately it made it to where people were running afoul with state statute as far as when they had the opportunity to get their licenses renewed. And so that caused a lot of havoc, caused a lot of problems. That is what ended up happening this last year. And so, and so the Attorney General's office is seeking to be able to, if something is happening at the Department of Revenue to where people cannot get their physical licenses, this will allow the Attorney General to do something in the short term to where people can still obtain their licenses and be able to still carry in other states. And so that is basically what this bill is doing. It's not tying it specifically to a disaster emergency, but it is tying it to something happens. It's providing additional flexibility to what wasn't originally in House Bill 2089. And that's my intention. And with that, Mr. Chair, I would close.
He has closed. We have finished the discussion. All in favor of the Carpenter Amendment to House Bill 2089, say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The bill is amended with the Carpenter Amendment. Further discussion, we're back on the bill. Representative Hoyt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment, And I would ask the revisor to send it. I have a few paper copies, but it's a lot of pages, but a pretty simple explanation, I think. This amendment would reinstate permits and training in order to get a concealed carry license in Kansas. And I know if you saw the research that Jordan provided to the committee, that explained the requirements to get a permit, and that would extend those requirements in order to carry hidden loaded guns in.
So just hold on. We've got what? It's a large amendment. It looks like about 15 pages. And you brought, what, 3 or 4 copies?
Yeah, and we email them out.
Right. You can email them out. But Matt, do you have them that you could put on the screen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just emailed the amendment to Connie, so hopefully she can send that out to everybody. And it's up on the screen, and I can scroll through it. So as Representative Hoy indicated, so essentially in 2016, when Senate Bill 45 was passed to allow concealed carry without a permit, this amendment would basically go and reverse the changes made in Senate Bill 45. And so if you think about all the things, it's very long because it walks through all the sections that were amended that have changed since then and reverts the law back to what it was prior to the adoption of Senate Bill 45 in 2016.
Okay. I'm checking with Connie. Connie, have you received that email? Can you get it out to? She's having trouble sending it, but just hold on, folks. Matt, I'm going to ask you to take some time up and kind of walk us through each page of it, and then I'll go back to the carrier of the amendment. That'll give Connie additional time to get it out.
Sure. Okay. So if you just start on the first page, the first one, you have a prohibition.
Hold it just a second. What did you
Sure.
do? I didn't hear it. You got to speak into the microphone.
So, Mr. Chair, I was saying that before we go through all of those pages, can we get a second on this just to verify that we have a second?
I have a second by Representative Clayton. Is that correct? Thank you. Go ahead and go through it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So starting on the first page, it's striking this requirement in terms of right now under current law, the criminal carrying of a weapon is carrying a handgun if the person's under the age of 21. It would just make it the carrying of a concealed firearm on the person, except if you go back to the exception, if they have a concealed carry license. So the policy change here is that you would have to have a concealed carry license pursuant to the Personal and Family Protection Act to lawfully conceal carry a handgun. And then it reinserts a bunch of the language that provided additional exceptions that were rendered unnecessary once the requirement that someone have a concealed carry license to lawfully carry a concealed handgun was repealed. So this is just reinserting those back from prior to the enactment of Senate Bill 45 in 2016.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as we heard from the Attorney General's testimony, I believe it was an unintended consequence when permitless carry was passed, that reciprocity was no longer allowed with some of these states. So that component is still reflected in this amendment.
Thank you. Discussion on the amendment. Yes, Representative Potter.
Thank you, Chairman. I had a question for the carrier of the amendment. How exactly would repealing constitutional carry prevent a criminal from carrying concealed?
The intent of this is so that we don't have untrained individuals carrying hidden loaded guns in our state. This is to make sure that those who carry concealed have firearm training, be 21 years of age or older, be able to lawfully possess a firearm, and then there is an application fee. So this is to make sure that people who are carrying understand the laws and have show that they are capable of handling a firearm.
Yes, you may follow up.
So in other words, your assumption is that those who are currently carrying under the current law without a license are not trained properly or do not understand how to carry a firearm, just as myself?
No, it's just saying that they're not required to do that. And as we've heard throughout this testimony, there have been a record number of gun sales. Things are moving quickly, and there's been some backlog with NICS and processing that paperwork. So I think that as individuals, understandably want to keep their families safe, especially through this past year, that let's make sure that those individuals know the laws and around concealed carry, as they are rather complicated.
Thank you. I'm going to move to
you,
Representative
Chairman.
Carpenter. Representative Carpenter, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question for the carrier of the amendment. My question is, in the last 5 years that we've had constitutional carry, you're saying that these individuals don't know the law. These individuals who are constitutionally carrying, can you point to a specific case where any of those individuals who were constitutionally carrying broke the law?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not mean to imply that those who do carry without a permit don't know that. I'm just merely stating that we as a state do not require them to do that.
So I just want to point out that, you know, we're talking about people who, you know, don't have concealed carry licenses, but yet they're not able to point to a specific case where somebody who was permitless carrying broke the law. And so I just want to point that out to the committee, and I will be voting no. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further questions to the carrier of the amendment? Yes, Representative Heiberger,
Just to make a comment.
please.
Now, I won't belabor the point, but we do require people who drive automobiles in the society to have training and registration and licensing. It just seems pretty rational to me that we would require someone to carry a deadly weapon in a public place to have training and licensing also. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative, you may close on your amendment.
Thank you. I close on my amendment.
Thank you. All in favor of the Hoyt amendment, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Are you looking for a registered? All right, then I guess we're going to go around and get everybody on the record here. The noes do have it. The motion fails on the amendment, and I'm going to go through with Representative Wagner is a no, Representative Woodard is a yes, Representative Garber is a no, Representative Howe is a no, Representative Ahrenkamp is a no, Representative Potter is a no, Representative Lisa Mosier is a no, Representative Clayton is that a yes? Thought it might be. Who else am I missing? Oh, yes, is a no. Jacob. Yeah, no. Carpenter's a no. Burris is a no. Representative Miller is 2 thumbs up, means of 1 yes. Representative Epley is a no. Representative Lewis Reese is a yes. Representative Hauser is a no. Representative Ahrenkamp is a no. Representative Penn is a no. Representative Hoyt is a yes. Now, let me ask, who's on, oh, yes, Reisman, no. Representative Heiberger is a yes. Is there anybody that's voting on the internet or the web? Do we have any members on the? Eric Smith is here. Yeah. I think we're good then. Madam, did you get all those votes? He's a yes. You got everybody? Give us a number. Thank you. Then the motion to amend has failed. Back on the bill. Now, normally, folks, if you have an amendment, I will take your motion, then I will hear from the reviser, and then I would take a second after that because I want the second to understand what the amendment is about. So that's always been my procedure. So I don't need a second until after the reviser has informed the committee of what the amendment is, so that the second is an informed second. But with that, we're back on the bill. Representative Wagner.
This is a bit of a technical question, of course, since now that we've combined 2089 into 2058. When the amendment was done on 2089 for Representative Carpenter, all of the language about a state of disaster emergency was changed on the first page, but there's identical language on the third page that was untouched. And is that an oversight, or am I just not understanding? I mean, it's literally the identical state of disaster language.
I'm going to turn that to the reviser who drafted the amendment. Matt? Matt, are you
Yes,
on?
yes, thank you. I was reviewing that. Yes, that does appear to be an oversight on my part. So to reflect that properly, I would ask the committee to give me leeway to make conforming amendments to that additional provision to reflect the change that was made with the amendment.
Thank you. That would be considered a technical change, would it not?
Yes, it would not change any policy. It was just to change the language to conform to the change that the committee's already made with the Carpenter amendment.
Thank you. Without objection, you have that permission. Back on the bill. Further discussion?
If we're just discussing the bill, Mr. Chair?
We're back on the bill, yes.
Okay, I'm just going to state that I did have, I felt like 2089 was fairly reasonable and supportive, but combined, I do not agree with allowing untrained, and some states also issue permits to convicted stalkers or those who have domestic violence misdemeanors. So on the overlying bill, I am opposed.
Thank you. Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Heiberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'd just like to start by saying that I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment, but a supporter of the Second Amendment as interpreted by the United States Supreme Court, not the National Rifle Association. I think I know a lot of you here want the Second Amendment to say that you can carry any kind of gun, anywhere you want, anytime, but that's not what it says. Like all of our fundamental rights, our right to bear arms is subject to restriction and regulation, and as Justice Scalia observed in the District of Columbia versus Heller decision, under current law, states are free to regulate or even ban the concealed carry of firearms, which is why I questioned the Attorney General at our hearing on this, about his use of the term constitutional carry, and because the right to concealed carry isn't guaranteed by the Second Amendment at this point. It may be someday, but it's not now, and it never has been so far. So I think that term, the way I see it, is just an alternative fact or what my mother would call a lie. And so I think this bill and most of the gun legislation that we've seen in this committee since I've been here isn't about protecting Second Amendment rights as they're currently recognized, but it's about normalizing the radical gun culture that the NRA has been pushing on society for the last 30 or 40 years. It's a gun culture that has no precedent in our history and no corollary anywhere else in the world as far as I can tell. I think it's one of the reasons why we have a vastly higher rate of gun violence than any other developed country. And so I have an amendment.
You need to come over and hand it out.
That would be great.
Thank you, Jeannie. Would you if you do that? And while she's handing it out, did Matt draft the?
Yes, he did.
Then Matt, could you give us an overview of the amendment? And hopefully put it on the screen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, really quickly, I'm going to send it to Connie so that she has that as well.
Very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment would put in changes to prohibit the concealed carry of handguns in the state capitol building. It's essentially in House Bill 2140 that has been introduced. It would amend 216309 and 757C21. Right now, there's an individual is able to possess a concealed handgun. This would prohibit them from doing so in the state capitol building. And then similar change was made to 757C21, prohibiting an individual from carrying a concealed handgun into the state capitol building, except in private means of conveyance.
Thank you. Is there a second to the amendment? Yes, Representative Clayton, second. Representative, would you like to further explain your amendment?
I would. As Matt explained, he did not sure I made it clear that this content removes the current content of the bill. It is a gut and go and replaces it with the contents of what has been filed as HB 2140. I think this amendment is timely, given the recent events in our nation's capital. Under current state law, once it were fully open to the public again, people with bad intent, like the people who recently stormed our nation's capital, could waltz through security with loaded firearms. And I don't know how many of you are packing in here today, but if I had to choose between having these folks stopped at the front door by the Capitol Police or relying on you to defend me with your pistols, I'd rely on the Capitol Police. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. And just on a happier side note, if we actually vote for this today, might be making House history. This would be maybe the first gut and go that would be tracked by the gut and go tracking mechanism we added to our House rules a few weeks ago. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Representative Hauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is more of an observation and a comment than it is a question. Once again, we have a prohibiting of law-abiding citizens for self-defense, because everybody knows that a criminal is not going to pay any attention to this prohibition of guns in the Capitol if he chooses to do so. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got to say, if I know my history correctly, this is one of the best Democrat amendments we've seen in the last decade. It was a Democrat amendment on the House floor that added concealed carry to the state capitol. So, I mean, I like what the Democrats did in that case. And so I'm going to go ahead and keep concealed carry here in the state capitol because I approve of what they decided to bring forward a few years ago. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I was on the House floor when that occurred. I have a very good memory of it. I'm sure Representative Hauser was. Representative Reisman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering how this amendment would affect retired law enforcement officers that can carry by carrying a It's under Title 18.
Would the carrier of the amendment consider answering that question?
That's a good question. I would the revisor on that one.
Okay.
Matt?
Matt?
I don't believe it would prohibit that, but I'm not certain.
Matt, could you answer the question?
Yeah,
Representative Rice?
if I heard correctly, it was for a retired law enforcement officer.
Correct.
Is that
Who
correct?
has a card issued by, under the federal law, if you've been a law enforcement officer for 10 years or more, you can then get issued a concealed carry without paying the fee, but you must also qualify within 1 year of any weapon that you carry. I believe it says on the back of that card.
Actually, you have to qualify every year.
Right, every year, but with a specific weapon.
Yes.
Right. So how would that affect with this amendment? If you know.
I'm not positive in terms of the definition. I have to look at commissioned law enforcement officer. But if you look at, that I pull up on my screen in subsection B. So this is the prohibition on individuals carrying a concealed handgun in the state capitol would not apply to a commissioned law enforcement officer, a full-time salaried law enforcement officer of another state or the federal government performing their duties in the state. A law enforcement officer is defined in the Personal and Family Protection Act. A person summoned by an officer to assist in making an arrest or a member of the military.
Thank you. Representative Heiberger?
Yeah, I would be, I mean, it's not going to happen. I'd be happy to entertain a friendly amendment to include retired officers in being exempt from the prohibition.
Well, let's just look at the original motion at this time. Representative Smith first. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the LEOSA Act, the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act, which is a federal law, it exempts a qualified retired law enforcement officer carrying identification from most state and local laws prohibiting the carriage of concealed firearms.
Thank you. That's a helpful and a clarification. Representative Hoyt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also, if I look on the, well, it's the last page of the amendment when it talks about line 12, when you look at the statute 75-7C22, it does include on the definition of law enforcement, retired law enforcement officers. I haven't read through this whole thing, but I'm wondering whether then that is included in here already.
Thank you. Is that a question for?
Confirmation from the revisor, please.
Thank you. Matt, did you get the question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking up right now. So 7C22 defines a law enforcement officer, any person employed by a law enforcement agency in good standing. A law enforcement officer who's obtained similar designation in another jurisdiction. Federal law enforcement officer, part of their official duties. I'd have to dig some more. This section 7C22 does not apply to any law enforcement officer or retired law enforcement officer who's been denied a license to carry a concealed handgun. So I don't see a specific exception for a retired law enforcement officer. So at the very least, if that was that wanted to be included in the amendment, we'd probably want to add a clarification on that exceptions list to include a retired law enforcement officer.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? Yes, Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this question goes to the carrier of the amendment.
Yes.
Representative, you brought up the uprising, insurrection at the United States Capitol. were there cases of ex-military, law enforcement officers, retired, and actual active law enforcement officers carrying concealed weapons in the Capitol building?
I believe I've read reports of ex-military and ex-law enforcement officers being there. I don't know if any of them were carrying concealed weapons.
And follow up, Mr. Chair. The U.S. Capitol doesn't have an open or concealed carry permit for people just to come in as we do here. Is that my understanding?
That's my understanding, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further discussion on the Heiberger Amendment? Yes, Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is more of a comment on the amendment. I take umbrage to the hostility coming from certain persons of the opposing party and the opponents of the original bill, and the vitriol against ex-military, against Leo or ex-Leo. These are public servants who have done their due diligence to be trained and proficient in the execution of their duties with their firearms, laying their lives on the line, both for this nation and for our communities. And to disparage them in a perpetual rundown of January 6th, however you deem and see that, is highly inappropriate, completely offensive, and has no place amongst this body. I would ask that you refrain from disparaging our military and our ex-Leo. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the Heiberger Amendment? Yes, Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that getting back to, the general discussion, especially as far as permits and things like that are issued, is that the people that I trust the most in this building are law enforcement, both active and retired, because we know that they have training. I trust their training, and I think that all of us actually who want to only have them carrying the weapons are the ones who are truly backing the blue here. So I, just wanted to get that out there. I do not think that there is any disparagement of our law enforcement or military taking place.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion on the Heiberger Amendment? Representative Lewis Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And getting back to the comments, there was no offense intended. They were strictly stating the facts. We have people who are renegades in any walk of life. I do respect people putting my daughter-in-law is a retired lieutenant colonel from the Air Force, highly trained, been in 3 combat areas. Law enforcement's in my family. So there was no offense intended. These are just stating facts that it did occur. I think the disparaging is the act committed by people who disgrace themselves by what happened on January 6th. So, Representative, if I offended you by my comments, I do apologize, but there was no offense intended. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Representative Hoyt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the carrier of the amendment.
Yes, go ahead.
In our current laws regarding the concealed carry in public buildings, do we allow them to restrict that access if they have proper security measures in place, such as law enforcement and metal detectors?
That's my understanding, yes.
Further discussion on the Heiberger Amendment? Seeing none, Representative Heiberger, you wish to close.
Thank you. I'll just say there's nothing in this amendment that was intended to disparage law enforcement officers or people in our military services. Again, I think it's showing respect to them. And I think those are the people who are charged with protecting the safety of this building, and I trust them to do so. And again, to Representative Hauser's point, and I think Representative Hoy's point, we do have security and we have metal detectors and law enforcement officers stationed at the entrance. And so I think that is another thing that makes prohibiting concealed carry in this building more reasonable. Anyway, I move my amendment.
Thank you. You've heard Representative Heiberger, motion to amend, and is closed on his motion. All in favor of the Heiberger Amendment, say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The noes do have it. The amendment fails. You've got your thumbs up and down, so I guess you want your vote recorded. Would that be correct? Let's just start over here with Representative Burris is a no. Representative Blake Carpenter is a no. Representative Clayton is a yes. When you have your hand up in that front of that window, it just makes it really difficult to see. Representative Jacobs is a no. Potter is a no. Howell's a no. Francis Arnkamp is a no. Representative Lisa Mosier is a no. Representative Garber is a no. Representative Wagner is a no. Representative Heiberger is a yes. Representative Reisman's a no. Representative Hauser is a no. Representative Penn's a no. Representative Smith is a no. Representative Hoyt's not voting. Okay. Representative Reese is a yes. Representative Epley is a no. Who did not I get? Oh, Representative Miller, most distinguished representative, is a yes. Well, the motion has failed. You've recorded your votes. We are back on the bill. Further discussion on the underlying bill. With that, Representative Arnberger, will you wish to make the motion to pass out as amended?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that we pass out House Bill, are we doing 2089? Are we doing 20, I'm sorry, I don't have it.
It's 2058.
I have moved that we pass out House Bill 2058 as amended favorably for passage.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Representative Carpenter, that's second. All in favor? Further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of passing out House Bill 2058 as amended favorably, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The bill passes out. You want your votes recorded? Then I will go around. Heiberger is a no. Wagner is a yes. Woodard is a no. Garber is a yes. Folks, when you're sitting in a chair, it takes a second here. Francis Arnkamp is a yes. Representative Howell is a yes. Lisa Mosier is a yes. Potter is a yes. Trevor Jacobs is a yes. Again, Clayton is a no. I can see this one. Clayton is a no. Carpenter is a yes. Jesse Burris is a yes. Epley is a yes. Hoyt is a no. Smith is a yes. Penn is a yes. Hauser is a yes. And Arnkamp is a yes. Give me a count on that when you get us. I'm sorry? Arnberger was a yes. Arnkamp, I'm sorry. Arnkamp, Arnberger. I was looking at Representative Hauser, who has two thumbs up, and it reminds me of a cartoon. I think that's what he meant. For those who remember, the cartoon involved someone with a mustache like yours. Yosemite Sam. I wasn't going to say it because I didn't know if he could feel that would be offensive. And my vice chair is too young to remember that. What do we have on it? I did not. Thank you. 14 yeses and 5 no. It passes out favorably. Committee, a couple of things. We've got a hearing tomorrow. I don't have anything listed for Friday. And it may be that Monday will be a pro forma day. Possible. We're not going to have a meeting. Next week, when you get the agenda out today, we're going to have hearings on the sports betting bill. I would suggest you pull it up. You should have a copy in your files. Read over it. It's a very lengthy bill. The Senate is having the hearings on their bill, I think, today and tomorrow. But ours is different. We probably, we need to establish a House position at some point in time, should the House choose to have a position. But we're going to do the proponents one day, the opponents and the neutrals the second day, so it'll be a 2-day hearing. There'll be some other bills attached later in the week. We're not going to be working that bill. We're going to be hearing it, and at some point in time, we will be looking at working it. Was that helpful, Representative Jacobs?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I missed the number of the House bill you're referring to.
Oh, Connie, you have that on the agenda. It's the sports book. It's $20.99. $21.99 is the bill that I would suggest you be reading for next week. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may not yet care to answer this question. I'm getting a lot of interest in the issue of medical cannabis.
It will be the following week.
Okay, thank you.
Helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Wagner.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the benefit of those of us who are relatively new around here, I had never seen a gut and go done on a committee level. My question is, how is germaneness handled? I mean, if somebody had a gut and go on something, if it's, I mean, this is plausibly germane, but if it wasn't, who decides?
I have seen them in committee. In fact, I have, when I was chairman of Judiciary, I did a number of them, because you got to remember that we're an exempt committee, and I don't look at timelines. But if you're on a non-exempt committee, you have, as chairman, you will have a certain amount of time to do it. You may have what we call a blessed bill, which maybe came from Fed and State to Judiciary. It's all you would do is strip it out, put another bill in it, and then because it's an exempt bill, then you could pass it out after the timelines. I think I know the rules probably better than most, being the former rules chair. But if you have any questions about that, I will be glad to answer those for you. Yes, you have another question.
Clarify, so there really is no germaneness issue on a committee level?
That's correct. I give you an example. I probably shouldn't mention this one, but it was one of my finer moments. The bankers had a bill, and they needed it out. It was a good bill. I did not have any exempt bills except one, and it was a revenge porn bill. And so I stripped out the revenge porn bill, put in the bankers bill, and the bankers lobbyist came up to me, a nice lady, and says, could you not find anything else? Because in those days, we still kept the original caption. So all of her bankers, she was saying, support this bill, they would look it up, and it was revenge porn. But I weighed that against them not getting the bill out. So yeah, that's my example of a gut and go. And I get reminded of that by the bankers lobbyist on occasion. But we did get the bill out, and eventually the title did change. Back on the committee business, as Representative Ardenkamp will know, who used to be my vice chair when we were doing sports book, he has a wealth of knowledge. So you may want to talk to him about it. But I'd say see the bill, look at the bill. If you have questions, don't hesitate to call Connie and come in and visit with me. I'll go through the process. We've worked on this at least 2 years, possibly almost 3. But if you have any questions about the bill, don't hesitate to call me, contact me some way, and come visit. But you will start getting lobbied by a number of organizations. I would say keep your powder dry. Wait till you hear all the testimony, and then make it an informed decision. That's my best advice to you. I'm not going to open it up for bill introductions. I don't think we have any. So we will see you tomorrow. Anything for the good of the committee? If not, we are adjourned.